Hi there, my name's Deandra, and I have something a little bit different to talk about today. So, the reason that I started my brand, That Science Couple, with my husband was because we wanted to disseminate information. So, we know that personal finance, if you can get things in order, then that can really provide you with a lot of freedom. We knew that nutrition can help your health and can be a long term investment. And we knew that being sustainable and minimizing your possessions and not wanting for a lot can create a simpler life that is also more affordable and then can also provide you with less stress. But the main reason behind all of this is because I'm a cancer survivor. And I've been one for 11 years now. And it's crazy to think because I'm only 34. How could it be that many years that I've been dealing with this? But it is something that happened to me. So when I was in college, in my master's degree, I had thyroid cancer. And for about 2 years, I didn't have health insurance. And so I had issues. I had swelling in my neck, and I just ignored it. It was easier to ignore and just say everything's okay than to think about going to a doctor and having bills that I couldn't afford. And so when I finally did get health insurance, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, because at the time we didn't have that bridging the gap. So it's great that now students can stay on their parents' insurance till 26, but when I was in school, that was not the case. And so I went to the physician and they looked at me, did a little measurement real quick, and said, okay, you need to go see someone else. That they couldn't handle it. And that they didn't even tell me who they were referring me to. They just said, it's a specialist, and, they're really good. So I'm sitting in the doctor's office, and I'm staring at this card, the business card of the physician they sent me to. And I read that it's a head and neck oncologist and a surgeon at that. And so it just hit me all at once, like, wow, could this be cancer? And, I had just figured, the swelling, like, there's all different kinds of reasons that it could be that. It could just be a temporary infection. It could have been, a goiter or something else that was benign, but actually it turned out to be thyroid cancer. And so they took biopsies and lots of, needles in my neck to take these samples. So I'm also in the field of cancer research, and I've had about 6 years of that before I went into my PhD program. And so I was learning about cancer research and how, a biopsy is the best way to tell if you have cancer. But from the lab side, I never realized what pain and frustration that causes to the patient, although we need answers. So it's not something we can really work around, at least at this point in time. And so they took those samples, and, sure enough, it was positive. And so that started the treadmill, the just go through this as fast as possible. And so they kind of gave me options, but I was such in shock that, how could this be happening to me so young? There's cancer in my family history, but no thyroid cancer. And so it came kind of out of left field. And while I didn't have the energy that I used to before, and I had, these other weird side effects and symptoms of just not feeling quite normal, I put them to the side because I needed to hustle. I needed to get my degree. I needed to graduate. I needed to move on with my life and, work till I'm 65 or 70 and then retire. But they kind of gave me these options. They said, you can have surgery A or surgery B, right? You can have one or the other, but there was never an option to not have surgery. It was just a given. They said, look, if you got thyroid cancer, this is the best cancer to get, which is so funny because no cancer is the best cancer to get. But they just meant that it was easily treatable. So it was stage 1, but it was in the lymph nodes. And so I kind of always had this question about that. How is it stage 1 if it's in the lymph nodes? Usually we think of lymph nodes being that it's spread from one site to another one. And so that would mean that it would be more stage 3. Yet for some reason, they classified it as papillary thyroid cancer, and they say that lymph nodes are normal. And so that's what it was. So they said surgery A, get part of your thyroid out and the lymph nodes, or surgery B, get all the thyroid out and the lymph nodes as well. And so I chose to go for the full thyroid. And the reason for that is they said, look, if you get the full thyroid out, that we can do radioactive iodine. We can disseminate everything. So we'll cut it out and we'll give you one dose. So it was really interesting. It was a one-time pill. And then I went home, and for 2 weeks, I was super radioactive. And unfortunately, I didn't get any superpowers from that. So, a little disappointing. But in all seriousness, it looked like if I got the first surgery, if I left some of my thyroid, that I could have to go through the surgery all over again and treatment all over again. And I didn't want that. So at 23, I decided, yeah, let's go ahead. Let's do this. Let's surgery. I had a low iodine diet. So the only nutritional guidance they gave me was a pamphlet that said, hey, eat more fruits and vegetables. But it was so generic and so non-specific that it didn't really imprint on me. And as a graduate student on a stipend, I made $11,000. So fruits and vegetables were very expensive. And at one point in time, I even got food assistance to help pay for that. So that definitely did help. And I would recommend it. But all in all, it was really just like rushed through. Like, I didn't see any extra specialists. I didn't get a second opinion. I didn't try anything naturally first. I just said, look, I want to graduate, and so I'm going to do this. And I wholeheartedly believed the surgeons and the doctors that they were giving me the best option. Although even when they did the radiation, they said, like, don't get pregnant for 6 months, which kind of was a red flag looking back at it now. But at that time, I didn't want children, so that was okay, and I accepted it. So I did the surgery. I did the radioactive iodine. I didn't realize it when I walked out of surgery. I thought, okay, it's not gonna be that bad. It was a 5-hour surgery. And so they said, like, look, we got it all. It's great. We just took out the lymph nodes that we saw, and actually they took out 40 lymph nodes, and that's a lot. And 14 of them were positive. So that's not all of them, which is great, but they did take more than they needed because they weren't sure. And so they said, we moved all your muscles around, and so, it might take some time to get used to it again, but we didn't cut anything, so that's great, and so you should, bounce back. And so when I went into the surgery, there was no communication over how long the recovery time was going to be. It was a 5-hour surgery, and when I woke up, I couldn't lift my arm above 90 degrees. The pain was so much that first night that they said they couldn't give me any painkillers because I was still coming off anesthesia. And I think it was a mix-up on the nurse's part that they just didn't come in to try to help me. So I felt like I was hit by a truck, and I've actually been hit by a truck in the past, and that was actually not as bad as this surgery was. I felt all of the gravity on me, and anytime I would move, I would feel that. And so it was a long time to get back to normal. I had physical therapy starting about 2 weeks after the surgery, and when I got there, they said, oh, you should have been here last week. And I was just like, how could I have been here last week? I was in so much pain, and they give you things to help manage it, but it's still something that you don't expect. So maybe if you've had a child before, you've gone through that kind of pain, that you will have a higher tolerance. But as someone who was so young, I didn't have anything to really compare it to. And so I did this. I started with physical therapy. I worked at it, and I had 6 weeks off from my program. And so luckily I was at the part with my research. I had already done all of the lab work, and I was just writing, and I could just sit home and be. And that was really important to me because I didn't know. If I was working a normal job, I didn't have any idea that I would be out for 6 weeks. And so now, 11 years later, I can raise my arm up all the way. And actually, this is the stronger arm of the two now, which is completely crazy to me. But I'll get to that, the reason why the other side isn't as strong now. But yeah, there was a lot going on, and I really didn't want to push back my life for this treatment. And so I was slated to graduate, and my advisor said, look, we'll give you an extra semester. And so I took that, and it gave me wonderful opportunity to make some income and to have time off. And then I had loving family members who gave me some funds to help pay for my deductible and my out-of-pocket maximum, and thank goodness for that, because if I didn't have that on $11,000 a year, I don't know how I would have paid even $2,000, because it was just so much money. And so after all that, I, picked myself up. I said, be strong and graduate. And so I did, and I graduated, and I moved on, and I looked for jobs, and the job market was terrible at the time. But I just knew that I needed to keep moving forward. I said, look, I've had cancer. This sucks. Honestly, no one wants to hear those words. And you think that you'll hear it later in life, maybe when you're 70, maybe when you've lived your full life, and you're just like, well, that's okay, because time passed, and I've lived a great life. But at 23, 24, I wanted to take on the world. I looked at it and said, look, there's many scientists that they died young. Like Rosalind Franklin died in her 40s, and my aunt died in her 40s. And I looked at that and said, if I don't have that much time, why am I going to waste it? And so I pushed on, and I got jobs. I broke into the field. I worked for some really big companies, and I enjoyed it at first. And I had this relationship with my first job where it was a temporary position, and I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to have that commitment because I'd gone through so much, and unfortunately that job was not it. And so I moved on to the next one. And the only benefit of that first job was like, it showed me that just because you have a degree, it doesn't mean that you have the experience that they're looking for in the industry. So if you have to go out and you have to take a job cleaning freezers with your master's, like I did, then you have to do that. And you have to pay your dues, and you have to be humble. And so that first job humbled me. And then I also met my now husband there. So that was a benefit as well. So I moved on to other jobs. I always felt this sense of urgency pushing me forward. Like, it's okay to be here as long as you're making progress. And I didn't think that I needed to climb the ladder immediately. I just wanted a path. I wanted to know, what do I have to do to get where I'm going? And so I worked hard, and I helped launch products. I was in R&D. I was working with cancer diagnostics, and the world just seemed to be in front of me. And I hit a point though where there were some upper level positions available, and I said I wanted to be interviewed for it. I want the opportunity. I have worked hard here, and I want to do this. And the answer was no. And so, I jumped around. I tried my dream job, which turned out to be a nightmare. And it wasn't the right fit. And I don't regret going to it because it showed me what jobs I didn't want to work at. And so I kind of bounced around for a while. And I ended up ultimately at a startup company. And it was exciting and fun and exhausting at the same time. And so I worked 5 days a week, but I commuted an hour and a half one way. And then I got to this point where I started pulling back. So the project that I signed up for ended up getting folded into other ones. And so I got moved around a couple times within a year or two, all while I was applying for a PhD, because I knew that I really wanted to make a difference. And since I had gotten turned down from those interviews and saying like, no, you can't even try to be going for this position, that you can't even be heard, that really hurt me. That I thought that I was qualified, but that others didn't believe so. And it was all because of I didn't have these letters behind my name. And so I said, you know what? I'll prove you wrong. I got a scientist title with a master's. However, when I got there, it was still late stage cancer diagnostics, and we weren't really pushing to make a difference. That, when someone's stage 4, there are people that have had remissions, and it's really awesome and wonderful. But a lot of the time, people who are in stage 4, the medications that they put out there, they don't tell you about this, but they only extend life maybe a month or 2 at times. And it's also really specific of when they got the medication. Like if they didn't have other things beforehand, it may not work. And so I just really felt like we were dropping the ball, that we need to catch people earlier, because if you're stage 1 or stage 2, like when I was stage 1, that was such a shock. I would have done anything to change. And the one thing that I really learned with the thyroid cancer was that I needed to be physically strong. Like I would go to my physical therapist and I would do these exercises, and it would be so hard that I would ask her, can you do this? Like, can you do this exercise? And she would say no. And then I don't have to, you have to. And that really like made an imprint on me, that if you are weakening physically, that if you can't do things that you could do before, that you should seek out a physical therapist. They are amazing people. And the wonderful part about it is they listen to you too. So they will ask you, how's your day? How's your week? How's your month been? And they really give you that support that you kind of miss otherwise. So, aside from seeing a surgeon once after a follow-up just to see like, how did the stitches go? And he was like, I did a great job. He bragged about like this scar, but I even have like a bruise here that's permanent from that surgery, and I can't do anything about it. And I've been self-conscious about it for a while, but you know what? My scars are showing what I've been through, that I am strong, that, I have this here. That's just a part of the surgery. And it's something that, will be with me forever. And like, yeah, I could get a tattoo over it, but I've had it for this long. And so what I realized as I was in the environment working on these things, seeing that like me at stage 1, I would have done so many different things, and the only thing I really caught on was physical activity and was like a low iodine diet, because they said that, high salt could have swelling issues. But I just didn't have much. I didn't know what caused my cancer. I didn't know if there was anything I could do about it, like what was in my control, what wasn't. And that's really what drove me to enter my PhD program. So I found plant-based nutrition, and in that, there's a lot of information about how, cancer is multifactorial. So it's in your environment, it's your water, it's your food, it's the air you breathe, it's your physical activity, it's your genetics. But we put so much emphasis on genetics as being the main driver when really it only accounts for about 10% of cases. And so, yes, you may like live in a city and there's air pollution and you can't move out of the city because that's where your job is. But there's other things that we can do to help mitigate that, right? We can work to manage our environment and to make it just a little bit better than it was before. And so I believe that this having an awareness around what is going on in your life and what you're exposed to is really important, because we don't want to be sitting ducks. So what I had done for a decade was I had worked with the American Cancer Society. I had been a captain for Relay for Life teams. Like, that's actually what my shirt is right here. And so I wore this today as a reminder that I started being a team captain and leading, my work groups and my church groups in this fundraiser for cancer, because I believe that they were really doing good. And they are. But I have one caveat, is that we don't really emphasize that whole lifestyle factor, the influential part that we can make changes in. And so I joined not having cancer, doing it for my family. Then I was a survivor. And so then I rallied for myself. And then I saw that in those last few years that I did it, I was doing it for others, because I would go to these survivor meetings and we would talk about what we're going to do as fundraisers and things like that. And meeting these other survivors, I would ask them how they were doing, and they would say, look, I had another cancer, but it's okay because it's treatable and I'm on this medication and I have this, chemotherapy or whatever kind of treatment they have. But they didn't really talk about what kind of prevention. So we know that an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. Yet we have these individuals who, maybe you had someone in your family very close to you die of cancer, but are you doing anything to prevent you from falling, into the same situation that they had? What are you doing differently? So yes, you share genetics, but you also share culture. You also share diet. You share your living arrangements sometimes even with these people. And we don't look at that. And it's just like so much we could be doing to manage what we have control over. We don't have control over our genetics, yet we try to work on that through these medications. And it's wonderful when it works. But then other times, these medications will cause resistance. So if you took this one chemotherapy, and then down the line, your cells, if they're not all killed off, these cancer cells, may develop a resistance, may develop a new mutation that allows them to thrive even when you are experiencing that treatment. And so you get to this certain point at the end where they all accumulate, and then this cancer just can't be taken down. And that's really unfortunate, because we're just ignoring all of these lifestyle factors. So now I'm not saying don't go and get the treatment, but what I'm saying is, what can we do to help support our healing? So this is something that I wish I had found earlier. I wish I had done on that first diagnosis. Maybe I wouldn't be where I am today with my second diagnosis. So last year, I got diagnosed with breast cancer at 33. And so that was really hard for me. But I thought I had been doing enough. And it turns out that I wasn't. I met with a naturopath, and she was the first one to ask me, why do you think you have this cancer? And she said, I ask this to all of my patients because some don't know, and that's okay. And others have an indication. They have something that they think caused it. And for me, I think what caused my breast cancer was stress. Was that job, the job that I really, really wanted for so long, but provided so much stress, so much being on the road. I got carpal tunnel during this job because I was doing data work and writing and constantly on computer and just clicking all the time, and I wasn't working out, and I wasn't doing the lifestyle things. Like, yes, we had smoothies for a while, but then life got busy, and we kind of did less. And I didn't have that passion for a life that I had before. And I think that was the perfect storm. That and using alcohol to de-stress. Yes, my husband was wonderful. We weren't even married, but when I came home, he would have a glass of wine ready for me. And I needed that because it was so much, and it was too much for me. And so that is kind of what pushed me into this PhD program. I looked for cancer research. I looked for nutrition because I had learned that there are certain carcinogens in our diet. And so if I can choose to not eat a carcinogen, yes, of course I want to do that. And other people, like, it might be okay if they can eat that. They can get away with it. Their genetics are strong. Maybe their environmental triggers are less, and so they can afford that. And I was talking with a friend who has diabetes. Now, we just got this really honest conversation. We said that other people can afford to eat the normal standard American diet, but we're not them. And what we can do is we can be intentional. We can choose things that promote healing, that support our health and wellness. And we just need to do that. Like, it's not fair that others can, have a cheeseburger and a milkshake and be okay, but it is our reality. And so, like, together we kind of just, like, accepted this, like, that's okay. That has to be okay. This is our life now. And I'd rather, choose different things to eat and eat in a different way that supports my health, and know that at the end of the day, look, I did everything possible. I did everything possible in my control. I can't control a lot of things, but I did what I could. And every day I contributed to my health. That's where I'm coming at with my nutrition coaching, is that I know this valuable information, and it's not just nutrition, it is lifestyle altogether. So the things that I have done during my diagnoses, like afterwards, I got a therapist, like all these things together, we are a whole person. And when you go to an oncologist or you go to a specialist, they look at you for this one piece and they say, that is what I'm going to pay attention to. And so with my breast cancer, it was actually stage 3 originally. Like if you look at the generic classification without any of the specifics, it would be 3. But then they put in the hormone status. So you can have different receptors for breast cancer. One's estrogen, one's progesterone, and they're basically hormones that go up and down during your normal cycle. And so I had positive for those. So then it kind of downgraded. So it's somewhere between a 1 and a 2. But I had lymph nodes that were positive. And so it was really like wild for me to think that like I had thyroid cancer with these positive lymph nodes. And thyroid cancer, they call it papillary thyroid cancer. And then I went through and I fought with these oncologists. I stood up for myself. I questioned them. They said, okay, what you're going to do is chemotherapy, followed by surgery, followed by radiation, followed by getting your ovaries out. And I said, hell no, we are not doing this. What we're going to do is we are going to look at things differently. And we're going to choose a plan that's right for me, not that's right for someone else, because most women with breast cancer are postmenopausal. They are older. And so there's a smaller group that is these young women with breast cancer, and they are phenomenal. I mean, they're just the most wonderful women that you will meet. And they go through a lot. Like, some of them have kids, they have full-time jobs, they have so much going on in their lives, and then this hits them and they need to take a break. And so that's why I said I think stress caused my breast cancer, because I see other people who have had this, and it seems to be women who are very giving to others. They always put others before themselves, and whether it's family or a job or something else, but they're not taking care of themselves like they should be. And so that's just a warning. If you are in that boat, if you don't think that you are taking care of yourself, then maybe you should be. Because maybe this is your wake-up call that you don't have to get that diagnosis. You don't have to have those abnormal cells to make a difference in your life now. We don't want to spend all of our good years working and then all of our retirement sick, or worse off, not even make it to retirement. So that is my plea, that if you know there's something lingering, if you have this issue. So before my thyroid cancer, I had the swelling in my neck for probably 2 years, unattended to. Between that and my breast cancer, I had food allergies, food sensitivities. I took this allergy test and it lit up. They did the blood work and there was a lot there, and they did the skin test and they did my entire back and it was all itchy and red, and just I had hives to everything, and it was trees, it was grasses, it was pollen, it was, dust, it was mold, it was all these things. It's basically everything you could think of environmentally I had, and foods on top of that. And I got to this point with the foods that, like, I didn't know what to eat, so we transitioned to plant-based, to vegan diet, and I started developing allergies and side effects and symptoms and my swelling in my throat to the foods that I was eating. So it seemed to get a little bit better, but there was an underlying condition. So I started to treat it almost as an autoimmune disease, and seeing like that maybe I'm having these food allergies because the food is leaking into my bloodstream. So there's called leaky gut, and basically what it means is that you have these junctions in your gut lining, these cells that butt up against each other, and sometimes they get fatigued and they start to pull apart, and there's some area in between them, and the food that's undigested can pass through and get into your bloodstream, and then your immune cells say this is foreign and they attack it, and then so you start to have this reaction to these foods that you're eating regularly. And the reason that I stuck with the plant-based diet is that is the diet that has the most antioxidants, which just means that it's gonna like limit some of that damage, and it also has the most anti-inflammatory components as well. So reducing inflammation can help to bring those cells back together in your gut lining and strengthen them so that you don't have this leaking into your bloodstream. And so this really came in conjunction with my diagnosis, because I realized too that while I was having these food issues, I was having hives. And when I would work out, the hives would come up, and like I couldn't sweat. And it was just the wildest thing that I could not sweat. And so I didn't want to work out. It made me not want to work out. And the only thing that I settled on was like yoga and walks, because if I went on a run, if I did any like HIIT, I would break out in hives, and sometimes my throat would swell, and I would just get a red face, and it wasn't enjoyable, and I just wanted to avoid it. And so as I got this diagnosis and I'm talking to this naturopath, we're going through we did a tox screen, we did all these things to find out look, you really have high levels of these exposures. So it wasn't just in my head, there was something that was actually there. So if your doctors are ignoring you and you have these signs, like I had high C-reactive protein, which is just a measure of inflammation. It was high, it was upwards of 3 and then up to 6, and it just kept going up, and I saw that was my inflammation, so I needed to target it with diet. And so I did, and when I did, I plummeted those numbers. So I pummeled them, and in a few months I got them back into the normal range, and I was just so happy with that this was before I was on any cancer treatment at all. And so I know that inflammation is a sign of cancer, and so basically this food allergy thing that I was dealing with, these sensitivities, maybe my immune system was busy trying to handle this, and while it was doing that, while it was stressed out, that's when the cancer was able to form. And it wasn't able to work on it because it had this fire. It said, you're literally on fire over here. I need to put this out. And you keep eating things and you keep getting exposed to stuff, and we're not really sure, because I would remove one thing and I would still have symptoms, and I would remove another thing and still have symptoms, and it just became so much to manage that, I almost gave up entirely. The diagnosis was a blessing, that I was able to finally find out what was going on, get some clarity, get some guidance, get some tips. And so I went from one oncologist, didn't agree with him, went to the next one, changed my treatment plan around, said I want to do hormone therapies first. I don't want to do the surgery first. I want to give this a try. Things didn't work out. I still ended up getting surgery. I had immunotherapies. Luckily, this last December, my first scan that was 6 months after surgery and radiation, I had 30 rounds of radiation, it came back clean. And so I realized that I can put my energy into advocating for others. That if you are struggling, if you're unheard, there's probably something to it. That you know your body more than anyone else does, and that you need to do something about it. So whether it's coming to work with someone like me, look, I'm a researcher at heart. I had a few friends who were also going through cancer diagnosis that I found online. They would tell me what their diagnosis was and what everything was, and I would go and I would do the research and I would try to figure it out because I'd read the scientific articles. I have this training in cancer research. I would apply it and I'd say, look, here are the options. Here is everything that you can do. It's your choice. And so they were informed to make their decision. And they're doing great right now. And I'm so happy for them that they made choices. They were different than mine. But that is okay because they knew the risk. They knew the reward. They knew what they were getting into. They knew the scope before they signed on the dotted line. And so as someone who has gone through this twice, I think it's important to face it head on, to give yourself time, that you don't have to do this all at once, that if you need a break, you can do that. And I actually have a free checklist of some questions that you can ask your doctor, your physician, or statements that you can tell them. So if you're struggling, then I want you to download this one. So the link will be below. And I really think that, like, look, this is what I struggled to form. But once I had it, I had that power. And so I want you to have this. So if you are still making those decisions, you need this in your life. And all you have to do is sign up. Just give me your email address and I'll send it right over to you. I am working on being more transparent. That cancer was very painful for me, enough so that I've had to record this portion multiple times to just not bawl my eyes out. That cancer changed me in a way that I will never be able to go back to. And so I look at it, I have these options. I can graduate, I can go and make a high income and help these big biotech and pharmaceutical companies, or I can choose the other route. I can be a coach and I can help people like you who really need me, who I can make that impact one-on-one. And I just need to make enough money to make ends meet, because money isn't the driver, because it's about our connections with other humans that really matters. At the end of the day, a life well spent will be if I have touched lives, not what my bank account reads. And so if you're not ready for change, that's okay. I've been there. Sometimes you just need to put out the fire. But if you are ready, if you know that there is things that you can change, that you're ready for it in your life, that you're willing to do anything possible to reduce your risk of an initial cancer diagnosis or of a secondary one, then I think my program is right for you. And so I invite you to check out my website, to follow me on social media, because I want to be more transparent. I want to tell these stories that I've been holding inside of me for a long time. And so you can also check out my other videos that are a little more lighthearted. I like to do nutrition recipes and also answer different health-related questions. And so those are nice and fun. And so I'd like to send you over to those to brighten your day a little bit. But I felt that this was important for me to cover today because it's something that can change lives, and I'm ready to step into that destiny that is ahead of me. So thank you for your time. I hope you have a great afternoon or evening or whenever you're watching this, and feel free to reach out if you need some help. All right, take care.